Hi, my name is Sid Ropp, and I'm reading to you from my book, A Simple Explanation of Absolutely Everything, which is a true theory of everything. Yes, I'm serious. Okay, page 6 now. Talks about units of consciousness. See how they all look alike? That's because they're all part of the same algorithm. We're all fractals. All right. Time passes and creation becomes more complex as subatomic particles reach out to one another according to principles of organization conceived by the metaverse and set into motion by the universal unit of consciousness. See, going back to the beginning of the book, the metaverse is undifferentiated potentiality. You would think of it, the Christians might call this God the Father. It is the undifferentiated absolute. When absolute had a thought, we're reviewing here, it became something, it became thought, and this is now no longer the unsullied metaverse. So it wrapped a membrane around itself, and now that God-sized and God-like membrane is our universal unit of consciousness. Before the creation begins, the thoughts of the metaverse and the thoughts of the universal unit of consciousness are identical because the UC, or the unit of consciousness, is a fractal that is broken off out of the ground state of consciousness. It knows everything. But once it starts kicking out time and space and particular points of view into our place that we now call our universe with our 3 and 4 and however many dimensions, now it has become the universal unit of consciousness. It is no longer identical to the Father. It is now the Son, because it's no longer in communication with the metaverse. It has sealed itself off and is now paying attention to our universe. Particles join to make atoms, atoms to make molecules, molecules to make single-celled organisms, single-celled organisms diversified into the full panoply of life. And every one of these material building blocks came equipped with its own unit of consciousness. Each unit of consciousness knew what particular role it needed to play in order to help the universe create and sustain itself. For every unit of consciousness could decide and instantiate its own special, localized piece of the metaversal ideal. See, they're fractals. So once again, like the holographic universe, they're fractals. Whether it's a, let's see, what have I got here? All right. Whether it's a tiny, tiny one, now they're getting bigger and more complex as they reach out to each other. Here we have a societal, now we have global. They all have the same knowledge and the same potential. An atom is as smart as I am. But the atom has a lot less responsibilities. It only has to know how to hold its atomic shape, how to be the atom it's supposed to be. I've got a lot more responsibilities. I've got to earn a living and feed people and take care of the cats and dogs and so forth and so on. I have a lot more jobs, but I'm no smarter and I don't have any greater chunk of the formula. A photon is as smart as Gaia, or the Earth. A molecule is the same formula as a solar system or a galaxy. That's why they look so much alike. I know it sounds dumb, but it's not. They're fractals. So back to page 6. Units of consciousness never evolve because each unit of consciousness is already a perfect replica of the originating universal unit of consciousness, the one that emerged directly from the metaverse. What changes is the sophistication and the abilities of the matter that limits that unit of consciousness's expression in the 3D world. Imagine it like this. Let's imagine that you, instead of being born as a human, you were born as a carrot. Could you still drive a car? Could you still watch television? No, you're a carrot. But the carrot knows how to be a carrot just as well as you know how to be a human. In fact, arguably better, because the simpler the expression of the unit of consciousness, the more fully it expresses itself without avidya, without a delusion. By the time look, my body here, my Whoville, Sid, has countless billions and billions and trillions of units of consciousness inside of it when you count all the particles on up to me. Me is just the one sitting on top. I don't know how to be a skin cell. I don't know how to be a toe. They know how to be a toe. They know how to be a skin cell. I'm only responsible for the person up at the very tippy top. That's the unit of consciousness that drives this particular machine. So, as the material becomes more complex, that is, you are more complex than a carrot, let's say, that unit of consciousness that governs that particular aggregation, I use the word aggregation a lot, it just means things stuck together. Aggregations are piles of things. They're not necessarily complex systems. It could just be a stack of cannonballs. That's just a stack. It's a simple aggregation. Whereas a stack of cells and organs makes up a person. That's a more complicated, systemic type of aggregation. Okay. So that unit of consciousness that governs that aggregation of material forces focuses its attention to that level of decision making. If there is an atomic-sized grouping, then there would be the same number of units of consciousness involved in that grouping that a physicist would expect to observe in the atom. If the atom joins up laterally with other atoms to form a molecule, then at the here and now of that new molecule's birth or instantiation, a new unit of consciousness focused on making decisions on behalf of that molecule enters the universe. This would be what I would refer to as the governing unit of consciousness. So, at each level of instantiation, let's see, from the smallest to the largest, okay, here's a quanta, it reaches out and joins hands with other quanta to become atoms. At the second the atom is formed out of the quanta, a new UC, or unit of consciousness, attaches to the atom and becomes that atom's governing unit of consciousness. And then it's in charge of the atom. When the atoms reach out to grab hold with other atoms, a molecule is formed, and at that moment that the molecule is formed through the chemical bonds or atomic structure, the unit of consciousness attached to that particular atom or molecule is formed. And it now becomes that molecular unit of consciousness that's in charge of the molecule. And so on. The organelles reach out and become organs. Now you've got an organ unit of consciousness. The organ systems, the organs reach out, become the organ system of your body. Now you got you got your ego, your mind, your byproducts of consciousness. And the unit of consciousness that attaches to the human aggregates that aggregate all the way up, this one at the top that I call my little triangle on the top, the Raja on top of the elephant, that's me. That's my unit of human-sized consciousness that is attached to my aggregation of particles all the way up through cells and organs to become me. When I was born, when I was quickened in my mother's womb, when I was conceived, that is, not born, that is when the unit of consciousness that attached to Sid came into this universe and began riding along with this aggregation to be the boss of it. And it is a perfect fractal of the universal unit of consciousness. It perfectly knows how to do its job. The reason I'm not perfect is because I have so many complex responsibilities at this level that I make mistakes. Plus, my organ systems have their own minds, so to speak, and they act on behalf of me and my meat, or whoville. And sometimes that looks pretty selfish, because my ego is only concerned with me. And that's what keeps me functioning smoothly, keeps me fed, gets me whatever I want whenever I want it, if it can. That's the ego's job. But the part at the top, that's the perfect fractal, that is not selfish. This is part of the mind of God. This is what it means to be made in God's image. I know, it sounds goofy, but we're fractals, folks. And that is that page.